License and registration, now! The black woman behind the wheel kept both hands spread on the steering wheel where everyone could see them. Her voice stayed even. Good evening, officer. May I ask why I was pulled over? Did I say you could talk? The beam from his flashlight smacked into her face like a slap. Nice ride for a black woman. Let me guess, he snorted. Stolen? Or your baby daddy buy it? His partner chuckled under his breath. Traffic slowed. People drifted towards the sidewalk. Phones already up. Red recording lights, blinking. A live stream started, comments racing across screens. But not one person stepped forward. Not one voice called out, Enough! People like you don't belong up here, the officer sneered. You need to remember your place. He leaned closer, drunk on his own authority, never noticing the man in the passenger seat watching him. Carefully, he didn't see the ODD smile slowly forming on that man's face. It wasn't anger or fear or even shock. It was clinical curiosity, like he was watching a rat trot into a trap it had set for itself. In a few minutes, Officer Tyler Kane would learn that the black man he dismissed so casually held every inch of his career in his hands. 15 minutes earlier, though, everything had felt flawless. The black Cadillac Escalade slid along Peachtree Road like a shadow carving through the molten orange Atlanta sunset. Behind the wheel, Dr. Camille Lawson allowed herself a fragile pocket of peace. Her surgical scrubs still clung damply to her skin after nearly 13 hours of life-or-death calls. Her shoulders throbbed. Her eyes burned with fatigue. But a small, stubborn smile tugged at her lips. It had been a brutal day, but a victorious one. In the passenger seat, her husband Marcus sat with a tablet balanced against his knee. The blue glow washed across his strong features. He was 52, tall and broad-shouldered, the sort of man whose presence bent a room's attention without effort. When he entered, people noticed. When he spoke, they leaned in. The way he carried himself, spine straight, gaze constantly assessing, words slow and precise, radiated control, authority, a quiet, practiced power. But in the cocoon of that SUV, he was simply Marcus, just the man Camille had married 22 years earlier in a small church on Atlanta's South Side. The husband who still set a mug of coffee by her pillow every morning and snored through movies almost every Friday night. Rough shift, he asked, eyes still on the tablet. Camille breathed out a tired laugh. You could say that. Rough didn't begin to cover it. The day had started at 4:45 a.m. with an emergency page. A 7-year-old boy named Jalen had arrived with a heart murmur spiraling out of control. Camille had him in the operating room by 6, his small chest open beneath the lights, his life resting literally between her fingers. By 8, he was stable. By early afternoon, he was awake, propped up in bed, asking if he could have ice cream and watch cartoons. The second case was worse. A premature baby, barely over 2 pounds, whose undersized heart faltered with every beat. The instrument she used looked like something from a dollhouse, delicate, almost absurd, alongside the reality they controlled. One slip, one tremor, and that infant would never make it to her first birthday. 4 hours later, the baby's breathing steadied on its own. Her parents collapsed together in the hallway when Camille delivered the news. But it was the third surgery that clung to Camille's thoughts, the one that would haunt her sleep for weeks. An 8-year-old girl named Alila who had collapsed during soccer practice. A sudden lung collapse, a rare tension, pneumothorax. Without immediate intervention, she had minutes, maybe less. By the time Lila reached Grady Memorial, her breaths were shallow and ragged, her skin tinged blue while her parents screamed for help in the waiting room. Camille had scrubbed in without hesitation. 4 relentless hours of fighting off the dark, of refusing to let that child slip away. 4 hours with death pacing just over her shoulder. When Lila's eyes finally cracked open in recovery, when she whispered hoarsely asking where her mom was, when a tiny, confused smile flickered over her face, Camille walked calmly into an empty supply closet and sobbed until her legs nearly gave out. That was the job. That was always the job. Carrying the weight of other people's children, standing as the last thin wall between a family and the worst day of their lives. More than 2,000 young patients. That was roughly how many kids' lives Dr. Camille Lawson had preserved in her 17-year career. 2,000 families who got more tomorrows because she refused to surrender when the odds turned ugly. Tonight, those same hands rested lightly on the leather steering wheel of her husband's $90,000 SUV. The usual, she told Marcus with a small shrug. Saved a couple of kids. Nothing major. He chuckled, the familiar private joke easing the leftover tension. In the Lawson household, saving lives was just part of the family routine. Another line in the day's schedule. Marcus's phone buzzed against the console, screen flashing with an incoming call. The display showed a name, Deputy Chief Harris. Marcus glanced at it, then tapped decline, letting the call die out. Camille arched an eyebrow. Work? Personnel issue, he said. Someone I need to handle Monday. She noticed the momentary clench in his jaw, the way his fingers tightened around the tablet. Whatever he'd been reviewing disturbed him. She caught a glimpse of the header before he shifted it away. Kane, T. Complaint summary. She didn't push. 2 decades of marriage had taught her the rhythm of his silences. When he was ready to talk, he would. What Camille didn't know, what she couldn't yet imagine, was that Marcus had been combing through complaints against Officer Tyler Kane for the past week. 19 complaints. 10 years of misconduct, excessive force, racial profiling, illegal searches, threats, evidence suspiciously discovered only after Tyler searched a vehicle. Every pattern screamed corruption. Every single complaint had been closed out, not sustained, insufficient evidence, no policy violation, file after file quietly buried. Marcus had followed the trail backward and found the shield behind the cover-ups. Sergeant Leonard Kane, Tyler's uncle, the supervising sergeant who signed off on each dismissal and smothered every investigation before it could breathe. An internal affairs meeting was set for Monday morning. Topic: Initiation of termination. Proceedings against Officer Tyler Kane. Fate, however, had its own agenda. Marcus clicked the tablet to sleep and reached for Camille's hand. His palm was warm, familiar, grounding. Tonight is just ours, he said softly. Everything else can wait. She squeezed back. I'm going to hold you to that. In the center console, nearly hidden beneath napkins and a dog-eared paperback, lay a black leather badge wallet. Inside, a gold shield briefly caught the last streaks of sunlight. Chief of Police, Atlanta Police Department, Marcus J. Lawson. Marcus rarely wore the badge when he was off duty. Tonight, in his mind, he was only a husband, only a black man in an expensive truck, rolling through one of Atlanta's wealthiest zip codes. And that, he knew, was exactly how any stranger looking in would see him. No titles, no power, no shield, Just another target for someone's assumptions. The blue and red lights appeared in the rearview mirror at exactly 7:45 p.m. Camille's body reacted before her mind did. Muscle memory, survival training, the choreography of being black behind the wheel in America. Interior light on, window lowered, hands locked on the steering wheel where everyone could see them. No sudden motions, no reaching for anything, no misunderstandings. "We're getting stopped," she said quietly. Marcus lifted his eyes to the mirror, frowning. He glanced from the patrol car to his wife and back again. "You weren't speeding," he said. "Does that even matter?" The question settled between them like smoke, bitter and suffocating. They both knew the answer by heart. In a decade of driving, Camille had been pulled over 12 times. She had never received a ticket. Not once had she broken a traffic law. But she had learned the rules, the unofficial ones that could kill her. The cruiser had been idling at a gas station. It slipped out the moment Camille's Escalade passed. No radar gun, no rolling stop, no visible reason, just a black woman behind the wheel of a luxury SUV in the wrong neighborhood. Marcus's fingers twitched toward the badge in the console, then froze. A thought sharpened. A choice formed. He could shut this down instantly, flash the shield, watch the officer crumble and backpedal. One glimpse of that badge and whoever walked up to the window would go pale, apologies spilling out like loose change. The stop would vanish into thin air. But then what? Then this would be a story about privilege, about the chief using his status to escape a situation that crushed other people. What about everyone who didn't have that option? Marcus needed to see what happened when an officer thought nobody important was watching. So he left the badge buried under paper napkins and paperback pages and stayed perfectly still. He watched the side mirror instead. Officer Tyler Kane approached like a predator closing in on wounded prey. His boots hit the pavement with slow, deliberate thuds. His flashlight was already blazing, cutting across the Escalade's windows, even though the summer sky still held a smear of light. His other hand hovered close to his holstered weapon. Kane was 37, 10 years with the Atlanta Police Department. The kind of cop who bragged about cleaning up the streets like it was a holy calling. His personnel file told another story entirely. 19 complaints, a trail of bruises, and broken trust. Excessive force against unarmed civilians. Stops that targeted black drivers over and over. Searches conducted without consent or probable cause, followed by convenient discoveries of drugs or weapons after the fact. Not a single complaint had ever stuck. No discipline, no suspension, no retraining. Every allegation had been stamped, dismissed, and filed away. Sergeant Leonard Kane had handled that part, signing off on each closed case, making his nephew feel untouchable. Tyler believed he was above the very law he carried on his hip. He was about to learn how wrong he was. Behind him, Officer Mia Torres lingered near the patrol car, uneasy. Torres was 31, less than a year out of the academy, 9 months into her field training. Her body camera blinked with a steady green light on her chest. She'd watched Tyler run this routine before. The hard-charging walk, the sneering questions, the way he took pleasure in making people squirm. It twisted her stomach. But she stayed quiet. She always stayed quiet. Kane reached Camille's window and blasted the flashlight into her eyes. License and registration. No greeting, no explanation. Just a command hammered with contempt. Camille kept her hands where they were, voice soft and clear. I'm going to reach into my purse for my wallet, sir. My ID is inside. She moved slowly, narrating every action before she made it. 15 years of cracking open tiny chests in an operating room had trained her to stay calm under pressure, even deadlier than this. She handed over her license and registration with steady fingers. Kane read the name aloud, his lip curling. Dr. Camille Lawson. He spit out the title like it offended him, like the word doctor didn't belong beside a black woman's name. He dragged his flashlight across the interior, the leather seats, the polished wood trim, the seamless tech built into the dash. So what is it? Some charity handing out pills to addicts? Free clinic? For people on welfare? His tone made every word sound dirty. Camille's face stayed neutral. Her voice didn't waver. I'm a pediatric cardiac surgeon at Grady Memorial, she said. I repair congenital heart defects. Today, I performed 3 operations, including a life-saving procedure on an 8-year-old whose lung collapsed during a soccer game. She paused just long enough to breathe. May I ask the reason for this stop, officer? Sati? Kane ignored her question like she hadn't spoken. The flashlight swung toward the passenger seat, swiping across Marcus's face for a single, dismissive second. 1 second was all the time Kane spent deciding that the man in the passenger seat didn't matter. And who's this? His tone dripped boredom. The boyfriend? Her husband, Marcus said evenly. Kane barked a short, ugly laugh. Husband, huh? Yeah, sure. Whatever you say. He said it like the very idea was ridiculous. Like a black surgeon in an Escalade couldn't possibly have a respectable husband. A real marriage, a life that belonged in this zip code. Marcus stayed absolutely still, his face unreadable. Behind his calm eyes, calculations hummed. One word about who he was would end this. But that wasn't the point. He thought about everyone else who'd never have that card to play. He needed to see what Kane would do when he believed the people in front of him were powerless. When he believed no one with influence was around to hold him accountable. So Marcus kept his mouth shut and watched. Kane turned back to Camille. Know why I stopped you, Doc? He drenched the title in sarcasm. I don't, officer. I wasn't speeding. My turn signal works. My registration is current. I'm unaware of any violation. Wrong, Kane snapped, stepping closer so his shadow smothered her. You failed to signal when you changed lanes back there. That's a moving violation in Georgia. Fine can hit $1,000. It was a lie. Camille always signaled. Every lane change, every turn, every merge. It wasn't caution, it was survival. She also knew something else. Kane's dashcam had conveniently malfunctioned before he pulled out. He had manually shut it off. This wasn't his first imaginary violation, and it wouldn't have been his last. I signaled, officer, Camille said evenly. I always do. Kane's eyes narrowed. His jaw flexed. You calling me a liar? I'm telling you what happened. Something volatile flickered across his face. The fragile ego of a man unaccustomed to being challenged. The rage of someone whose authority had just been questioned in public. Step out of the vehicle, he ordered. I have a right to know. I set out. Now! His hand drifted toward his belt, fingers brushing the holster. It was a casual motion on the surface, but every black driver in America knew what that gesture meant. The moment when a routine stop can tilt toward tragedy. The moment when survival hinges on reading the next 30 seconds perfectly. Camille opened her door slowly, keeping her hands visible at all times. She stepped out with the deliberate care of someone crossing a minefield. Her posture was relaxed, non-threatening, every move slow and predictable. "Turn around," Kane snapped. "Hands on the hood." "Officer, I'd like to know what I'm being charged with." "Obstruction. Failure to comply. I'll throw in suspicious behavior because I feel like it." He seized her arm and spun her around hard. "Hands on the hood now, unless you want resisting added." The metal was warm under her palms, heat from the engine seeping into her skin. Kane shoved her forward, her cheek scraped against the polished paint. These are the hands that held open a child's chest this morning, she thought. The hands that have kept thousands of small hearts beating. Now they were being treated like weapons. Kane started his pat-down, his hands moving slow, lingering where they had no legitimate reason to linger. It wasn't a search, it was a violation wrapped in a badge. On the sidewalk, the crowd had thickened. Cars rolled by, slowing to gawk. Screens glowed everywhere, live streams multiplying from every angle. Comment bubbles stacked over the scene, a messy mix of outrage, disbelief, crude jokes, and laughing emojis. Still, no one stepped between them. Not one person physically intervened. Not one voice rose loud enough to make him stop. Kane tugged the handcuffs from his belt. "I'm a surgeon," Camille said, fighting to keep her voice level. "I need my hands. I operate on children. Please don't. Should have thought of that before you decided to be difficult." Click, steel cinched around her wrists. Far tighter than necessary. Tight enough to bruise, to bite into her skin, to remind her exactly who controlled this moment. She refused to cry out, refused to give him that, but inside, something cracked. A sliver of dignity she'd spent her entire life building buckled under the weight of his contempt. She was a doctor, a healer, a woman who had poured everything into mending other people's children. And here she was, pinned against her own vehicle, wrists shackled, treated like a threat, simply because of the skin she lived in. In the passenger seat, Marcus decided the show had gone on long enough. His fingers closed around the door handle, and he stepped out carefully. "Officer," Marcus called, his voice slicing through the commotion, calm but carrying. "I need you to stop what you're doing, right now." Kane whipped around, flashlight beam stabbing at Marcus's chest. "Who the hell told you to get out of the car?" "That woman is my wife," Marcus said, moving forward with his hands visible. "You have no probable cause for this stop. You have no legal grounds for detaining her, and absolutely no justification for manhandling her like that." Kane's face twisted, rage crowding out reason. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. People were supposed to cower, not argue. "I don't give a damn who you are," he barked, stepping closer, hand drifting back toward his belt. "This is my scene, my stop, my rules. Get back in the truck or join her." "This isn't a scene," Marcus replied. His tone was almost frighteningly controlled. "This is an illegal traffic stop conducted by an officer who disabled his own dashcam before initiating contact." For a heartbeat, something flickered behind Kane's eyes. Recognition, a flash of fear. How did this man know that? The fear curdled quickly into pure aggression, the frantic anger of an animal that senses a trap closing. Behind him, Officer Torres shifted her weight anxiously. "Tyler," she murmured, barely above a whisper. "Maybe we should wait for backup. Something about this feels off." "Shut it, Torres! I said I've got this!" He squared his shoulders toward Marcus, scraping together the full height of his authority. "Last chance. Get back in that SUV, or you're getting arrested too." "On what charge?" Marcus asked. "Interfering with police business, obstructing justice. I'll figure out the rest on the way downtown." Marcus didn't move. His voice stayed eerily steady. "You don't want to do this, officer." "Is that a threat?" Kane stepped in so close their faces were inches apart. "You threatening a cop now?" "I'm giving you an opportunity," Marcus replied. "Walk away right now. Take off the cuffs, apologize to my wife, and maybe, you'll still have a future in this department tomorrow." Kane barked out another jagged laugh, utterly convinced of his invincibility. "You've got nerve, I'll give you that," he sneered. "But you picked the wrong officer to play with." He grabbed Marcus's arm and yanked. "Turn around. Hands behind your back." "Don't put your hands on me," Marcus warned. "Resisting arrest," Kane shouted, loud enough for every camera to catch it. "Everybody see that? He's resisting." He twisted Marcus's arms behind him with unnecessary force. The handcuffs clicked shut, sealing Kane's mistake. Chief of Police. Marcus Lawson, 25 years on the job, the highest-ranking law enforcement officer in the city, was now on his knees on the concrete, wrists chained behind him by one of his own officers, an officer still utterly clueless about whose career he just detonated. Kane shoved Marcus down beside Camille, husband and wife lined up on the pavement, metal biting into their skin. The crowd murmured, phones tilting for better angles of the humiliation. The group watching had swelled to nearly 60 people. Live streams were blowing up, comments pouring in by the thousands. Around the world, strangers watched a black couple in Atlanta get arrested by an officer who looked like he just won a prize. Some viewers were horrified, some cracked jokes, some dropped crying, laughing emojis. None of them understood what they were actually seeing. Kane loomed over the pair like a conquering hero, chest heaving. "Two in custody," he announced loudly, making sure the cameras captured every word. "Stolen vehicle, looks like. Not bad for one night." He grabbed his radio. "Dispatch, Unit 52. I've got 2 under arrest at Peachtree and Roswell. Possible auto theft. Both suspects secured. Need transport." "Copy, Unit 52, dispatch answered. "Backup and transport en route. ETA 4 minutes. Not detained, arrested." Tyler Kane had just formally arrested the chief of his own department. Camille turned her head, her cheeks scraping the rough pavement as she twisted toward Marcus. "Are you okay?" she whispered. Marcus didn't look at her. His stare never left Kane. "This is going to end soon," he said. "How can you be sure?" "Because backup is on the way," Marcus answered quietly. "And at least one of those officers is going to recognize me." Camille's heart pounded. She wasn't sure whether that reassured her. Before she could respond, Kane strode to the rear of the Escalade and popped the trunk without asking. Another casual violation of the Fourth Amendment to add to his growing list. Inside were 3 straightforward items: a gym bag stuffed with workout clothes, a case of bottled water, and a folded American flag sealed in a glass display case. Kane lifted the flag, turning it like it might provide evidence of something sinister. "What's this?" he called, holding it up so the crowd and cameras could see. "You swiped this from some veteran's funeral? A parade?" A sharp inhale rippled through the onlookers. Someone muttered, "That's a burial flag. Are you out of your mind?" Camille's voice broke for the first time that night. "That flag belonged to my father-in-law, Master Sergeant Robert Lawson," she said. 32 years in the United States Army. He served in Vietnam and Desert Storm. He earned a bronze star and 2 Purple Hearts, she continued, tears streaking down her face. He died 6 months ago, surrounded by his family. That flag was folded by soldiers in full dress. It was handed to my mother-in-law with the words, "On behalf of a grateful nation, please accept this flag as a symbol of our thanks for your loved one's honorable service." Her breath hitched. It's the most sacred thing we own. Kane looked from the flag to Camille, then dropped it back into the trunk with a dismissive flick, as if it were junk mail. "Probably stole that too," he said. In that instant, something fundamental shifted inside Marcus. The detached curiosity that had kept him observing, analyzing, counting every misstep, evaporated. The methodical patience that had brought him here hardened into something far colder. This man had mocked his wife, degraded her work, trampled her rights, and now he had casually insulted the memory of Marcus's father. Master Sergeant Robert Lawson had bled for this country, had sacrificed birthdays and anniversaries to defend the freedoms Tyler tarnished tonight. That flag had been folded with reverence, presented with trembling hands. It embodied service and sacrifice, and this officer, this disgrace in uniform, had tossed it aside like trash. Marcus closed his eyes and forced a slow breath through his nose, forcing the wild, furious heat in his chest into something sharper, more controlled. Rage alone was useless. Precision, though, that could destroy careers cleanly. When he opened his eyes again, his decision was complete. Tyler Kane wouldn't simply lose his badge. He would lose everything he'd built on other people's pain. The sirens grew louder, echoing off glass and steel as backup approached. Blue and red reflections splashed across nearby storefronts as 2 additional patrol cars rounded the corner, gliding to a stop behind Kane's unit. 4 officers stepped out, scanning the scene. The first was Sergeant Aaron Blake, 41, 15 years on the force, recently promoted. Promoted by Chief Marcus Lawson himself. Blake could still picture the email he'd received 1 week earlier, the words standing out in bold at the bottom of the message. "Congratulations on your promotion," the chief had written. "Your work in community policing exemplifies the future we want for this department." Blake had reread that line 3 times, stunned and proud that the chief knew his name, his cases, his reputation. Now, as he took in the sight in front of him, a black couple cuffed on the pavement, Kane puffed up over them like a conquering warrior. Something in his gut told him this scene was wrong. He recognized Marcus almost instantly, even out of uniform, even with his wrist bound. It wasn't just the face, it was the posture, the centered calm, the way Marcus's eyes didn't flinch. Blake's heart slammed against his ribs. Tyler had no idea. None. "What the hell?" he breathed under his breath. Torres glanced his way, reading the shock on his face. Meanwhile, the crowd sensed a shift in the energy, the murmurs growing louder. Kane strutted toward Blake like he'd personally taken down a cartel. "Sergeant, we've got 2 suspects, possible stolen vehicle, maybe more. They got mouthy, non-compliant, you know the drill. I've got them secured for transport." Blake barely heard him. His focus locked on Marcus's face. The chief's eyes met his, and in that brief, silent exchange, Blake read everything he needed. "Stay calm. Don't blow this here, but remember every second." "Unit 52?" Blake said carefully, turning as if he were just confirming details for his report. "You run the plates yet?" "Yeah," Kane said with a dismissive wave. "Waiting on confirmation, but I'm telling you, this thing is hot. Look at it." Blake resisted the urge to roll his eyes. Mind if I double-check with dispatch? Knock yourself out, Kane said. He was too busy watching the crowd's cameras, basking in his own performance. Blake keyed his radio, voice deceptively casual. Dispatch, this is Sergeant Blake on scene at Peachtree and Roswell. Can you confirm registration on Georgia plates? He read off the numbers carefully. A brief pause crackled over the airwaves. Copy, Sergeant. Vehicle is registered to Dr. Camille Lawson and Chief Marcus Lawson. Dispatch replied, no reports of theft. Both owners in good standing. The words hung there, loud enough for anyone paying attention to hear. Blake let the information sink in. Torres's eyes widened. One of the other officers muttered something under his breath. Kane's jaw clenched, the first tiny fracture in his confidence. Dispatch, repeat that last, Blake said, even though he hadn't misheard. Registered to Dr. Lawson and Chief Lawson, the dispatcher said again, confirming that Chief Lawson is present. Blake met Marcus's gaze once more. Marcus gave the faintest, almost imperceptible nod. Confirmed, Blake answered. Kane's face drained of color, then flushed an angry red. Wait a second, he snapped. You're telling me this guy is… Chief Lawson, Blake said evenly, not raising his voice. He didn't have to. The word chief landed like a dropped anvil in the middle of the scene. The crowd reacted instantly, the murmur cresting into shocked exclamations. Phones zoomed in tighter. Somewhere, a live streamer shouted, Yo, that's the police chief! Torres stared at Kane, horror and dawning comprehension battling across her expression. Every insult, every shove, every bogus charge they just witnessed replayed in her mind. But now with the knowledge of who Kane had been talking to like that. Camille watched the realization spread through the officers, through the crowd, through Kane himself. For the first time that night, a flicker of satisfaction slipped past her anger. Marcus just watched Kane, utterly silent. Blake stepped closer to Kane, dropping his voice low enough that only nearby microphones might catch it. You cuffed the chief of police and his wife for a fake traffic stop, he said, with your body cam rolling, with mine rolling, with half the city watching on their phones. Kane opened his mouth, then shut it again. For the first time, uncertainty crept into his eyes. The concrete beneath his feet no longer felt solid. Marcus shifted slightly on the pavement, chains clinking softly. When he spoke, his voice carried the steady weight of someone who'd spent decades commanding rooms. Sergeant Blake, he said, I believe Officer Kane has made more than enough decisions for one night. Blake nodded once sharply. Yes, sir. He turned to Torres. Officer Torres, remove the cuffs from Dr. Lawson, now. Torres didn't hesitate. She holstered her weapon, stepped forward, and moved toward Camille. As she unlocked the cuffs, Torres murmured, I'm so sorry, ma'am. Camille's wrists throbbed, but she kept her chin high. Blake stepped to Marcus next, key already in hand. Chief, he said quietly, with your permission. Marcus inclined his head. The metal fell away with a click that sounded, to Blake, like a verdict being sealed. He thought again of the chief's email from a week earlier, how it praised his commitment to real community policing. That promotion email had ended with a neat digital signature. Marcus J. Lawson, Chief of Police. Blake approached the chaos with his training on autopilot. Two suspects on the pavement, Kane towering over them, a wall of onlookers, phones raised high. Then his gaze locked on the cuffed man's face. Blake's stride faltered. His stomach lurched. Ice shot through his veins as recognition clicked and refused to let go. Torres, he hissed, snagging Mia's elbow and tugging her a few steps away. His voice dropped to a razor-thin whisper. "Take a good look at the man on the ground. Really look this time." She glanced over lazily at first. "Those are Tyler's suspects. He said they were in a stolen—" "His face!" Blake snapped quietly. 1 second, 2, 3. The color drained from hers. "Oh my God! That's Chief Lawson." Blake's throat felt tight. "Marcus Lawson, Chief of Police," he managed. "Tyler just slapped cuffs on our chief." Tora's hand flew to her mouth. Her body cam suddenly felt like it weighed 50 pounds on her chest. "He doesn't know," she breathed. "Tyler has no clue who that is." "Not yet," Blake said grimly, already moving. "But he's about to find out exactly who he's been manhandling." He closed the gap in 5 long strides. "Kane, stop what you're doing, right now!" Tyler turned, irritation twisting his features. This was his moment, his big collar, and he didn't appreciate anyone stepping into his spotlight. "Blake, what's your problem? I've got this locked down. 2 suspects, stolen SUV, resisting." "Do you have any idea who you just arrested?" Blake cut in. 2 felons in a hot—" Blake didn't bother responding. He dropped to one knee beside Marcus, already fishing for his handcuff key. "Chief Lawson, sir, are you injured? Do you need EMS?" The word chief detonated like a grenade. Kane's mouth fell open, but nothing came out. His brain clawed at reality, struggling to match the man in front of him to the framed portrait hanging in every precinct lobby, the one he'd walked past 1,000 times without really seeing. "Chief," he stammered. The words scraped up his throat like glass. "What do you mean? Chief!" Blake's hand shook so badly it took 2 attempts to slide the key into the lock. "Chief Marcus Lawson," he said, voice taut. "Atlanta Police Department. The man whose name is on my promotion paperwork. The man who runs this entire agency." The cuffs finally popped open. Marcus rose slowly, rolling his wrists. Angry red marks ringed his skin. "The same man," Blake added quietly. "You just arrested on camera." Kane's face shifted, in stages people would talk about for years. First confusion, brows knitting as he tried to assemble the puzzle pieces. Then dawning recognition as the features in front of him finally matched that hallway photograph. Then unfiltered terror, primal and ugly as the magnitude of what he'd done slammed into him. Chief Lawson," he choked. I didn't. I couldn't." He couldn't say the words clanging around in his skull. "You were just a black guy in a fancy car. Just another nobody." That's all he'd allowed himself to see. Marcus stood very still. He let the silence stretch until it felt like a wire pulled tight across the scene. Let Kane squirm. Let the crowd lean in. Then he spoke, his voice carrying cleanly over the murmurs. "I am Marcus Lawson," he said, not raising his tone, not needing to. The authority in it was enough. "Chief of Police, Atlanta Police Department, 25 years on this job, 93 days in this position." He took a single measured step toward Kane, then another. "And you, Officer Tyler Kane, have just placed your own commanding officer under arrest." The words hit harder than any shove. Kane's knees threatened to buckle. "Sir, I didn't know," Kane stammered, stumbling backward. "I didn't recognize you. The light was in my eyes and That," Marcus cut in, voice like sharpened steel, "is exactly the problem. You didn't recognize me." He let that hang. "And do you know why? Because you never actually looked. You saw a black man in a high-end truck and saw a target, an opportunity, a problem to dominate." And he moved closer. Kane retreated again, almost tripping. My wife is a pediatric heart surgeon, Marcus continued. She has saved more than 2,000 children. Today alone, she operated on 3 young patients, including a little girl who would be dead right now if not for her skills. He gestured toward Camille, who Blake was gently helping to her feet. You slammed her onto the hood of her own vehicle. You called her a thief. You questioned whether she belonged in her own neighborhood. You cuffed the hands that mend children's hearts, he said quietly, because the shade of her skin offended you. His gaze pinned Kane in place. You didn't know who I was. You didn't care who she was, because to you, we're interchangeable, invisible, automatically guilty until we somehow manage to prove we deserve to breathe. Kane's legs finally surrendered, and he dropped to his knees, not from a push, but from the weight of it all. I'm sorry, he whispered, voice shredded. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I swear to God, Chief, I didn't know. Blake guided Camille closer. Her wrists were raw and swelling, purple bruises already blooming beneath the skin. Dr. Lawson, ma'am, Blake said hoarsely, I can't apologize enough for what happened. Camille's eyes, however, were locked on Kane. The apology shouldn't come from you, she said. It needs to come from him. She stepped toward the kneeling officer. Her hospital scrubs were smeared with road dust and grime, her cheeks still scraped, her face lined with humiliation and exhaustion. But her voice was steady. You're not sorry for what you did, she told him. You're sorry the truth came to light. Kane looked up, tears streaking through the dirt on his face. Please, he choked. I have a family, 2 kids. I'll lose everything. So did Lila, Camille replied softly. The 8-year-old I operated on this morning. She has parents who adore her. A little brother who thinks she hangs the moon. She almost never got to grow up because her lung collapsed while she was playing soccer. Camille crouched until their eyes were level. I gave her back to them. That's what these hands are for. She lifted her bruised wrists so he couldn't look away. What do your hands do, Officer Kane? She asked. When you put that badge on, do you give anything to people except fear, except humiliation, except proof that the power we're told will protect us can be turned against us at any moment? She straightened and walked back to Marcus's side. Kane stayed where he was, shoulders shaking, sobs ripping out of him. The crowd surrounding them had swollen past 70 people now. News vans screeched up to the curb. Booms mics rose over the sea of onlookers. Helicopters droned overhead, their spotlights slicing the night. But something in the air had shifted. The snickering was gone from the live chats. The laughing emojis vanished from the streams. The tone in the comments transformed into fury, into shared outrage, into a sense that everyone watching had just witnessed a line being crossed. Someone near the back started clapping. One lone pair of hands, then another joined, and another until applause rippled through the crowd like thunder rolling down the street. Hold him accountable, someone yelled. We see you, Chief. Karma! Justice! Marcus lifted his hand, palm out. The noise dimmed almost instantly, like someone had turned down a volume knob. I need everyone to listen to me, he called out. Carefully. Cameras zoomed in. Reporters leaned forward. Every phone swung toward him. Tonight, Marcus said, my wife and I were arrested by one of the officers I'm responsible for leading. My wife, Dr. Camille Lawson, has saved more than 2,000 children in this city. He inhaled slowly. Tonight, she was dragged from her car, slammed against the hood, groped, and handcuffed like a criminal. He paused, letting the words settle like dust. Not because she broke a law, he continued, and not because she posed a threat. She was treated that way because she is a black woman driving a luxury SUV in a wealthy neighborhood, and because Officer Tyler Kane decided people who look like us don't belong here. His gaze swept across the crowd, then locked on the nearest camera lens, as if addressing the entire city at once. I could tell you this was a one-off incident, he said, that it's just one bad officer, one tragic mistake, a misunderstanding we'll handle quietly. He shook his head. But that would be a lie, and I am done lying to protect a system that's rotting from the inside. He turned his body squarely toward the cameras. His voice stayed even, but the steel in it was unmistakable. Officer Kane has 19 separate complaints in his personnel file, Marcus said. 10 years of documented misconduct, excessive force, racial profiling, illegal searches, planting evidence. The crowd erupted in gasps and low curses. Reporters' pens flew over notepads. Every single complaint was stamped unfounded or not sustained, he went on, buried by his supervising sergeant, who also happens to be his uncle. He let that sink in. That's not just one bad cop. That's a machine built to protect him. That machine, Marcus said, stops tonight. He nodded toward Kane. Effective immediately, Officer Kane is suspended without pay pending a full investigation. His badge and weapon are being taken right now. Blake moved without hesitation, unclipping them. I am personally referring this case to the United States Department of Justice, Marcus continued, not just internal affairs, not the local DA. Federal prosecutors with no loyalty to this department. This case will not disappear into a file drawer. This officer will not be shielded, he said. There will be real consequences. From the edge of the crowd, Torres stepped forward, drawing a steadying breath. She'd spent 6 months watching this man terrorize people and 6 months biting her tongue. Tonight, that ended. Chief Lawson, sir, she called. Marcus turned toward her. Dozens of cameras swung in her direction. It was the kind of moment that rewrites an entire career. I want it on the record, Torres said, voice trembling but clear, that I witnessed everything tonight. Every word Officer Kane said, every action he took, and I failed to step in when I should have. She swallowed hard, but went on. My body cam recorded the entire stop, beginning to end. The footage auto-uploads to the department servers. I can't erase it. No one can. She squared her shoulders. And I am willing to testify under oath, she finished. In court, on camera, wherever I have to. I'll say exactly what I saw tonight. Kane's head jerked up. MIA, he rasped, eyes wide. Come on, we're partners. You're supposed to have my back. She shook her head, the hesitation gone from her voice now. We were partners, she said, but I'm done covering for someone who doesn't deserve the uniform. She turned back to Marcus. I know I should have spoken up earlier, she admitted. I know my silence made me part of the problem, but I want to help fix it now, however I can, whatever it costs me. Marcus studied her for a long beat. What you did tonight, staying quiet, was wrong, he said. You understand that? Yes, sir, she replied. I do. But what you're doing now, Marcus added, takes courage, and this department is starving for that kind of courage. He extended his hand. Torres shook it, blinking back tears. The crowd surged into applause again, louder than before. Behind them, Blake hauled Kane to his feet. The same handcuffs Tyler had used on Camille were locked around his own wrists now, cold and unyielding. Tyler Kane, Blake said formally, voice carrying, You're under arrest. Deprivation of civil rights under color of law, false arrest and imprisonment, assault, evidence tampering, filing a false police report. As he spoke, he began reciting the Miranda warning. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you. Kane staggered as they guided him to the patrol car, then twisted to look back at Marcus one last time. Chief, please, he begged, eyes wild. You know I'm sorry. I wasn't thinking. I didn't mean... You're right about one thing, Marcus said, his voice gone cold. You didn't know who I was. You didn't care who my wife was. You saw a black woman in a nice vehicle and decided, based on nothing but that she deserved to be degraded. His gaze didn't waver. That isn't a slip-up. That's who you are. And now, he finished, everyone knows it. The cruiser door slammed shut with a dull final thud. The watching crowd parted as the car pulled away, carrying Tyler Kane toward a future he'd never imagined, one that involved cell bars instead of flashing lights. Marcus turned back to Camille. For a moment, the cameras, the reporters, the phones all faded into background noise. You all right? He asked softly. She managed a tired, crooked smile. I've had better Saturday nights, she said. He laughed once, quietly, then pulled her into his arms, holding her like he could shield her from the entire world. 20+ years of marriage spoke louder than anything he might have said. I'm sorry, he whispered into her hair. I should have ended it sooner. You ended it exactly when it needed to end, she replied. Now the whole world can see what usually happens in the dark. Marcus nodded slowly. This wasn't just about one rotten cop. It was about a pattern, a sickness that had been allowed to grow unchecked. Tonight, they'd yanked it into the light. Tomorrow, the real work, changing the system that produced men like Kane, would begin. 3 days later, Tyler stood shackled in a federal courtroom, blinking under colder, harsher lights. The place was packed, wall to wall. National networks had sent crews. Local stations set up cameras wherever they could wedge a tripod. The story had detonated online. The racist cop who cuffed his own chief without recognizing him. Millions had watched the clip. Millions more had shared it. The hashtag #JusticeForCamille trended around the world for 2 straight days, plastered under every angle of the video. The clerk read the charges one by one. Each count felt like another nail sealing the lid on Kane's former life. Deprivation of civil rights under color of law, false arrest and imprisonment, filing a false report, tampering with evidence. Investigators had confirmed he'd shut his dash cam off manually, aggravated assault, conspiracy to violate civil rights. The federal prosecutor rose, a thick stack of files under one arm, her expression carved from stone. Your Honor, she began. The defendant is not simply a misguided officer who made a bad choice on a stressful night. He is the end result and the emblem of a system that protects abusers while destroying trust in the communities they police. She lifted a heavy folder. 19 complaints over 10 years, she said. 19 people who documented harassment, profiling, violence, and abuse of authority. 19 citizens who believed the system would protect them. She let the folder drop onto the table with a loud, deliberate thump. Every single one of those complaints was dismissed or buried by his uncle, Sergeant Leonard Kane, who is also under arrest for obstruction of justice and conspiracy. She faced the bench squarely. The United States respectfully asks for the maximum sentence allowed by law. Nothing less. will even begin to restore public faith in institutions that failed so catastrophically here. Kane's defense attorney tried to soften the blow. He talked about Tyler's years of service, his lack of prior felony convictions, his status as a father. He asked the judge to consider probation or the lightest possible term. The judge listened, hands folded, expression unreadable. Then he leaned forward, eyes fixed on Kane. "Mr. Kane, I've reviewed every second of video and every complaint filed against you," he said. "I've read the statements from your victims. I've examined the records your uncle manipulated on your behalf." His voice hardened. "You were given 19 chances to correct course, 19 warnings that your conduct was unacceptable, 19 opportunities to become the public servant you swore to be." He shook his head once. "You ignored all of them. Again and again, you chose to abuse your authority, to target people because of their race, to demean citizens who had done nothing wrong. You have not earned leniency," the judge said. "You have earned accountability." The sentence came down: 7 years in federal prison, 3 years of supervised release afterward, a permanent ban from ever working in law enforcement again. His peace officer certification was revoked for life. As the marshals led him away, wrists chained, into the side door, scattered applause broke out in the courtroom, growing until the judge had to call for order. But Kane wasn't the only one facing consequences. 2 weeks later, U.S. Marshals knocked on the front door of Sergeant Leonard Kane's suburban home. He was arrested in full view of his wife and grandchildren. The charges reveal a checklist of corruption, obstruction of justice, conspiracy to violate civil rights, destruction and falsification of records, willful failure to perform his duties. For nearly a decade, he had buried evidence and intimidated complainants. He had interfered with investigations. He had shielded his nephew from every consequence. His sentence, 3 years in federal prison plus complete forfeiture of his pension. 26 years of service gone. The fallout kept spreading. The police union that had fought so hard to protect officers like Tyler found itself under federal scrutiny. Internal review procedures were torn apart and rebuilt. A civilian oversight board was granted real subpoena power and authority to recommend discipline. 6 of Tyler's previous victims came forward with fresh lawsuits. Drivers pulled over for looking suspicious, pedestrians thrown against walls, families terrorized during bogus searches. People who had been too afraid or defeated to speak up before. Their combined settlements topped $4 million. At a press conference, Chief Lawson laid out the most sweeping reform package in Atlanta Police Department history, standing at a podium crowded with microphones. From that day forward, he announced, body cameras would be mandatory for every single interaction with the public. No equipment problems, no accidental outages. Any citizen complaint would automatically trigger an external review by civilians, not just internal affairs. No more secret investigations, no more good old boy cover-ups. An early warning system would flag officers with repeated complaints for immediate intervention, retraining, or dismissal. "We will not wait for another night like Peachtree Road," he said. The numbers that followed told their own story. Within 2 years, citizen complaints against Atlanta PD dropped by roughly a third. Confirmed misconduct findings went up, not because officers were suddenly worse, but because wrongdoing was finally being documented and punished instead of hidden. The culture was shifting, grinding forward slowly, with plenty of resistance and backlash, but moving all the same. Through every hearing, every briefing, Officer Mia Torres kept showing up. She testified in both trials. She held nothing back. She detailed every traffic stop where Tyler pushed too far, every time he targeted someone because of skin color, every moment she'd stood by, sick to her stomach, saying nothing. She brought dates, case numbers, body cam timestamps. The blowback was immediate. The union called her a traitor. Threatening notes appeared in her locker. Someone slashed her tires. A dead rat showed up on her windshield. She refused to back down. She filed reports on every threat. She changed nothing about her routine except her resolve. At a department ceremony 6 months later, Chief Lawson pinned a commendation ribbon to her uniform himself. "Officer Torres has shown us what real bravery looks like," he said into the microphone. "Not a lack of fear, but the decision to do the right thing in spite of fear." The auditorium rose to its feet. Mia was promoted to head a new community engagement and reform unit. She designed trainings on de-escalation, implicit bias, and constitutional policing. She traveled to academies across the country, speaking bluntly about what happens when good officers stay silent. When reporters asked why she testified against her own training officer, her answer never changed. "Because silence made me part of the problem, and I'd rather lose my job than live with that." A year after that night on Peachtree Road, Marcus and Camille got news that rewired their world. After years of trying, after fertility treatments, tears, and conversation about giving up, they were finally expecting. When their daughter was born, they named her for Marcus's father, the veteran whose folded flag Tyler had tossed aside, Ella Patrice Lawson. She entered the world strong-lunged, furious, and perfect. She had no idea what her parents had already survived. She didn't know that months before her arrival, her mother had been slammed onto a car hood and shackled while bystanders filmed. That her father had knelt on hot pavement in cuffs beside her. One day, they would sit her down and tell her everything. They'd tell her they refused to play the victims in someone else's story, that they stood up, spoke out, and pushed a broken system to bend. The video of that night would later be titled, "Dirty Cop Handcuffs Black Surgeon," and her husband doesn't realize who he just arrested. It racked up millions of views, but the headline doesn't tell you the whole truth. Tyler looked at Camille Lawson and saw a mark, a black woman driving an expensive SUV. In his mind, she couldn't possibly belong. He saw skin tone and a price tag, and decided that equaled guilt. He didn't see the 2,000 children whose hearts she'd repaired. He didn't see the 25 years her husband had given to law enforcement. He didn't see the life they'd built, the hope of the family they were still trying for. He saw what he wanted to see, what he'd trained himself to see. And he was wrong about every single thing. That part of the story is disturbing enough, but it isn't what haunts me. The part that sticks with me, the part I need you to really sit with, is this. The worst thing about that night isn't that Tyler arrested his own chief. The worst thing is that he treated countless people exactly the same way before. People who didn't have a chief sitting in the passenger seat. People no one believed. People whose stories never made it to a courtroom, let alone the news. Camille Lawson had advantages most targets don't. She had witnesses. She had multiple angles of video. She had a husband with rank and access. What about everyone else? The black teenager pulled over for driving suspiciously in his own neighborhood. The Latino family whose car gets torn apart because an officer claims to smell weed that isn't there. Every person of color who's been humiliated by someone wearing a badge they thought meant protection. Justice isn't supposed to depend on who you're married to. Respect shouldn't require a title or a uniform. Human dignity isn't something you earn after proving you deserve it. It's something you're born with. And if you think this is just one dramatic story, consider the numbers. Researchers at Stanford analyzed tens of millions of traffic stops. They found that black drivers are stopped significantly more often than white drivers, about 1/5 more frequently nationwide. They also found black drivers are roughly twice as likely to have their vehicles searched, even though officers actually find contraband less often when they search black drivers. In recent years, over 1,000 people a year have been killed by police in the U.S. Black Americans are killed at nearly triple the rate of white Americans. Those aren't talking points. They're data. Behind every line on those charts is a family, a name, a story. So what can you actually do with all this? First, learn your rights. In most places, you can refuse a search of your car if there's no warrant and no real probable cause. Civil rights groups like the ACLU publish free guides on what to do during traffic stops. Download one, memorize it, share it with your kids. Knowledge won't solve everything, but it can keep you safer in the worst moments. Second, record everything you legally can. In every state in this country, you're allowed to film police officers performing their duties in public as long as you're not interfering. Your phone is more than a distraction. It's a tool for accountability. Use it wisely. Third, push for real civilian oversight where you live. Departments with independent review boards and true transparency tend to see fewer abuses, fewer cover-ups, and more trust from the communities they serve. Find out whether your city has such a board. If it doesn't, ask your local officials why not. Fourth, share stories like this one. Not because algorithms reward outrage, not to rack up views or stoke cheap anger, but because somewhere right now, while you're watching this, someone is going through what Camille did. Sitting on a curb, cuffed, humiliated, wondering if anyone will ever hear their side. They need to know they're not alone. Ella Lawson is 2 years old now. She chases butterflies at the park and shrieks with laughter when the sprinkler hits her shoes. She lights up every room she runs into. She still doesn't know about that night on Peachtree, the night her parents were forced to their knees while strangers watched and filmed. One day, Marcus and Camille will tell her. She'll ask, "What did you do?" And they'll have an answer they can stand behind. "We stood up," they'll say. "We spoke out. We refused to accept this as normal. And we changed things, even if only a little." That's the legacy they're building. Not just a viral clip or a trending hashtag, but a city, maybe someday a country, that is slightly safer for kids like Ella. Slightly fairer, slightly more honest about what's really been happening on our streets for generations. Tyler Kane once believed his badge made him untouchable, that people who looked like Marcus and Camille were just obstacles, statistics, problems to be handled. He was wrong about everything. Now, in a federal cell with 7 years to think, he has time to replay that night frame by frame and feel the weight of each choice he made. The night he proved on camera exactly why reform isn't optional. So here's where I turn it back on you. Have you ever seen something that felt unjust? A stop that didn't look right? A search that felt wrong? A tone that made your skin crawl? What did you do in that moment? Did you speak up? Did you film? Did you check on the person afterward? I want to hear about it. Drop your stories below. I read every single one. And if this story stirred anything in you, anger, sadness, resolve, don't just click away and forget it. Hit that like button so this message gets pushed further. Subscribe if you want more real stories about power, accountability, and the people caught in between. Share this with someone who still thinks these are rare, isolated incidents that only happen somewhere else, to someone else. Because every view is a tiny vote for transparency. Every share is a reminder to people in power that we are paying attention. Every comment is proof that we refuse to go back to pretending this isn't happening. Systems don't change because one person gets loud. They change because a whole lot of people refuse to sit quietly anymore. Never underestimate what that pressure can do. And never underestimate the person standing quietly in front of you. The nurse in scrubs grabbing gas after a double shift. The kid in a hoodie walking home from practice. The driver in the luxury car you don't think fits the neighborhood. You have no idea who they are, what they've lived through, or whose lives they touch. You don't know whether history will remember them, or you, for what happens next. Marcus and Camille looked like just another black couple on a Saturday night drive. To Tyler, they were nobodies. To the kids whose hearts Camille repaired, she's the reason they're still breathing. To the officers who watched their chief get cuffed and then watched him demand change, Marcus is the reason their department is different now. To Ella, they're just mom and dad, the people who carried her, protected her, and refused to bow. So the next time you witness something that twists in your gut, remember them. Remember Peachtree Road. Remember that one video, one stop, one decision to say, this is not okay, can ripple far beyond what you see in the moment. You don't have to be a chief or a surgeon or a judge. You just have to be someone who refuses to look away. If this story made you think, made you feel, or just made you pause for a second, don't let that fade. Talk about it, share it, act on it in whatever way you can, at the ballot box, at your city council, or just by pulling out your phone when it counts. Because silence is a choice. And tonight, in this community, we're choosing not to be silent anymore. No one is safe from injustice, so we must stay awake. If you are in your late 60s, 70s, or beyond, you've lived through enough American history to know that unfairness is not some abstract idea. You remember grainy TV images of marchers crossing bridges, children escorted into newly integrated schools, neighborhoods where a wrong turn could get you pulled over just for looking out of place. That's why the story of Dr. Camille Lawson and her husband, Police Chief Marcus Lawson, lands so hard. Here we have a black woman at the top of her profession, a pediatric heart surgeon who literally holds tiny beating hearts in her hands, and a black man who climbed all the way to the top of a big city police department. By any measure, they did everything this country asks, worked hard, followed the rules, served others. And still, one Saturday evening on Peachtree Road, they found themselves face down on hot pavement, wrists throbbing in handcuffs, treated like criminals in front of a crowd with cell phones. For older Americans, that moment is a chilling reminder. Progress is real, but it is not complete, and it is never guaranteed. Camille's degrees, Marcus's gold badge, the folded flag in their trunk honoring a veteran who earned his Bronze Star and Purple Hearts, None of it protected them from an officer who saw only skin color and a fancy SUV in the wrong zip code. Many of you know that feeling. The shock of being judged before you open your mouth, the sting of being told in words or in looks, "You don't belong here." The first lesson from their story is simple and sobering. Titles don't shield you. Money doesn't shield you. Even age doesn't always shield you. The only real safety we have is in a culture that refuses to tolerate this behavior. And that culture must be defended again and again by people who are willing to name what is wrong when they see it. Lesson 2. Courage is contagious and silence has a cost. If you've ever watched a grandchild stand up to a bully or seen a neighbor finally speak out at a town meeting, you know that courage can spread. What Marcus did that night was more than personal pride. He made a choice that many older Americans can recognize from their own lives. He refused to use his privilege to quietly escape, and instead let the full ugliness of the moment play out in the open. He could have flashed his badge the second those blue lights came on. He could have ended the stop with a quick, embarrassed apology from a suddenly nervous patrolman. But then nothing would have changed. Not for the next black driver, not for the next frightened teenager sitting on a curb wondering if anyone would believe their story. So he stayed silent, watched, and waited, documenting in his mind each insult, each illegal move, each moment when this officer exposed his character. When backup arrived and a sergeant finally recognized the face he had seen in every precinct hallway, the entire scene flipped. The same handcuffs that had cut into Camille's wrists clicked shut around Officer Tyler Kane's. Whole careers shifted in a single breath. Yet the most powerful turn did not come from Marcus alone. It came when Officer Mia Torres stepped forward. Many people your age know what it is to look back and wish they had spoken up sooner. Mia had stood by through earlier stops, watching her training officer push lines she knew were wrong. She had swallowed her doubts, told herself she was new, that she had no power. That night on Peachtree, she chose a different path. She told the truth on camera, under oath, knowing full well the union would call her a traitor and colleagues might turn their backs. She reminded all of us, especially those who have already lived a long life, that it is never too late to move from silence to action. The second lesson is that courage is contagious, and your decision to speak up may give someone younger the strength they need to do the same. Lesson 3. Real change is slow, imperfect, and still worth fighting for.